You ever smell perfume on someone that makes your stomach twist? Not because it's bad, but because it's familiar in the worst possible way? I was standing in our backyard, watering the ridiculous bonsai tree my wife insisted we keep alive, when I smelled it. Vanilla and jasmine with that sharp synthetic afterbite. Naomi's perfume. The one she said gave her headaches, but apparently not enough to stop wearing it for someone else. The petals from the white roses she'd planted last spring were falling apart at my feet, shriveling in the heat. I remember thinking they looked like tiny crumpled napkins, useless after a mess someone didn't bother cleaning up. Fitting. That was the exact moment the sliding glass door opened, and she stepped out. Heels on, makeup perfect, hair pinned like we were going out for our anniversary. But we weren't. Not this time. Naomi handed me a silver envelope. She didn't even look me in the eye. Her voice was as casual as if she was reminding me to pick up milk. I wanted to make it easier for both of us, she said. No drama. Just sign where I highlighted. I didn't move. I just stared at the envelope. There was a gold wax seal on the flap. She had actually sealed our divorce papers like it was a party invitation. Divorce, I finally said. You're gifting me divorce papers now? Her lips curled, just slightly. You're welcome. I should have felt crushed, maybe even broken, but something else took over. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you're happy. The kind you give when a puzzle piece clicks into place and you realize the picture you were building wasn't what you thought at all. I slid the envelope back into her manicured hand, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Wait till your lover sees what's in his envelope." Her face didn't move, but her hand twitched. Just a little. Enough to confirm what I already knew. Naomi had no idea what I'd found. No clue I'd been preparing my own gift. Quietly, carefully, waiting for her to show her hand. She just did. And I wasn't gonna play nice anymore. Naomi froze for just a second. She's good at hiding emotion. Always was. But she isn't perfect. I've studied her face longer than I've studied anything else in my life, and that twitch in her jaw? That was fear. She quickly smoothed it over, turning back toward the kitchen like I hadn't just dropped a live grenade at her feet. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, Grant," she said without turning around. Her voice now sharp, clipped, colder than the steel in her divorce envelope. "But we're done. You should be glad. You hated being married to me anyway." She was trying to bait me, trying to get a reaction. But I didn't bite. I just walked into the house, calm as ever, and opened the drawer by the coffee maker. I pulled out a plain white envelope. No gold seal. No drama. Just quiet, simple truth. Inside were the photos. 7 of them. Naomi, in her yoga pants, wrapped around a man who wasn't me. Kissing him outside a motel that charges by the hour. I didn't even need to hire a PI. My phone had backed up her shared photo album automatically. Turns out, she'd created a folder titled Wellness Retreat and forgot to unlink our devices. The irony? I would have never looked if she hadn't been acting so pristine, so above it all for months. That day I saw the first image. I sat in my car for hours just staring at the dashboard. No tears, just shock. Like the ground underneath me had turned into glass and I could see the cracks before they shattered. But I didn't confront her then. No, I waited. I started collecting moments like weapons. Her excuses, her new lingerie receipts, her hotel bookings that didn't match her business trips. Even the text messages she forgot to delete, written like teenage fantasies. "I feel alive when I'm with you. He never touches me like you do." And then the one that really sealed it for me, "Don't worry, he'll be out of the picture soon." So yeah, I smiled when she handed me those divorce papers. Because the picture she thought she was painting didn't match the one I'd already developed in full resolution. The moment she walked back into the kitchen, I placed the white envelope gently on the granite counter, right next to her quinoa salad she'd made for Instagram but never actually ate. "That one's for you," I said, mirroring her tone from earlier. No drama, just truth. Flip to the last page. "That one's my favorite." She narrowed her eyes and slowly peeled the envelope open, sliding out the contents like she already suspected what was inside. With every photo she pulled out, her expression shifted. from bored disdain to confusion to tight-lipped horror. She didn't say a word for a full minute. The final photo, her and her lover sitting shirtless in his car, her hand in his lap, trembled slightly in her fingers. I didn't say anything else. I didn't gloat, didn't yell. I just walked into the garage and opened the overhead compartment where I had a second suitcase already packed. I didn't know when this moment would come, but I knew it would. She always said I wasn't spontaneous. Guess she was wrong about that too. When I came back inside, she was still staring at the photos. I placed my car keys on the kitchen island. By the way, I added, almost as an afterthought, you should probably warn him about the texts, about his name being on a lease application while you were still legally my wife. I'm sure his wife will love that. Naomi looked up at me, her face drained of all color. What do you mean, his wife? I finally met her eyes. Oh, you didn't know? He's married too. 3 kids. Lives out in Brighton with a golden retriever named Lucy. Guess he forgot to mention that during your retreats. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. I stepped out the front door without looking back. But this was far from over. I drove for 2 hours without any real destination in mind. The farther I got from that house, the lighter my chest felt. It was strange. Leaving behind a decade of my life with Naomi should have come with some kind of emotional explosion. But there was none. No screaming in the car, no tears down my face, no punching the steering wheel. Just silence. Heavy, final silence. And beneath it, relief. I checked into a small inn near Lake Roland. The kind of place that smelled like cedar and fireplace ash, where the bedspread is always tucked too tightly and the complimentary coffee tastes like burned soil. But it had one thing I needed: privacy. The woman at the desk, probably in her 60s, didn't ask questions. She just gave me the key and said, "Hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't smile back. I just nodded because the truth was, I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. Back in the room, I opened my laptop and uploaded the files I had been keeping for months. Photos, text screenshots, location logs. No threats, no ugly captions. Just evidence. I encrypted them and saved them to 3 separate drives. One went into my luggage. One into my glove box. And the last one, that one I mailed to someone I hadn't spoken to in over 7 years. Naomi's sister, Corinne. Corinne and I used to be close. She never liked Naomi's need for attention. As she put it, and after the wedding, she drifted away. I never blamed her. Now, I needed her to know what her sister had become. I didn't expect anything in return. I just wanted someone else to witness the truth. Someone who wouldn't pretend this was all my fault like Naomi was probably already trying to spin. That night, my phone buzzed. Not a call. A message. Unknown number. But I recognized the writing style immediately. "You smug little piece of trash. You think you've won something? You're pathetic." I read it once, then deleted it. She was unraveling. The calm, polished version of Naomi had begun to crack. The version she showed the neighbors, her book club, her co-workers. That confident, powerful woman with the Pinterest-perfect life was slipping. And I knew why. Because appearances were everything to her. And I had just shattered the glass box she'd built for herself. The next day, while eating a dry scone in the lodge cafe, I got another text. This one came from a number I didn't recognize at all. "We need to talk. I didn't know she was married. Please." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Then why were you in a hotel room with her while she still had my name?" No answer. 10 minutes passed. Then another message. "I made a mistake. Don't destroy me." And that's when it hit me. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about his life, his family, his job. He had more to lose than Naomi ever did. She had been reckless, but he had been stupid. And I had leverage. I didn't want revenge. But I wanted him to understand something Naomi never did. Actions have weight. And when you treat people like they're disposable, sometimes the ones you throw away land on their feet and remember everything. So I made a plan. I waited 2 days, just long enough for Naomi to stew in the uncertainty. Then I returned home, not to move back in, but to pick up a few final things. The driveway was empty. Her car wasn't there. But what caught me off guard was the for sale sign on the lawn. I hadn't filed anything. Neither had she. But there it was. Naomi had already decided to sell the house. Our house. Before the ink had even dried. I went inside. The place felt hollow. Furniture was still there. But her presence wasn't. No scent of her hairspray. No humming in the next room. Just echoes and dust. On the counter was a folder labeled, "Staging Photos." She had already hired a real estate agent. There was even a printed note taped to the fridge. "Grant, I assume you'll take your tools and files by Friday. I've boxed the rest. Don't contact me again." And taped next to that note? A selfie of her and him. Smiling. On a boat. Holding champagne. Like nothing had ever happened. I took the photo, calmly walked to the fire pit in the backyard, lit a match, and dropped it in. It burned fast, curling around their smug expressions, turning into soft gray ash. It didn't make me feel better, but it made it feel over. And sometimes that's enough. But Naomi had no idea the real spark hadn't come from the match I lit. It came from the video I was about to release. And I wasn't going to do it for revenge. I was going to do it for closure. For me. And maybe for someone else who needed to see who she really was. The idea didn't come to me out of spite. It came from the silence. The silence of too many nights spent wondering if I was losing my mind, if I was the one who had changed, if maybe I was just boring. Naomi never raised her voice. She never stormed out. She just faded inch by inch until I was living with a stranger who smiled more at her phone than she did at me. So no, this video wasn't born out of revenge. It was born out of survival. I needed to be heard. Not by her, not by her lover, but by someone who would understand what it feels like to watch your own life become a performance where you're the only one who doesn't know you're in the wrong scene. I booked a small studio in a business park 2 towns over. No frills, just a camera, a stool, and a man behind the lens who asked no questions. I didn't script anything. I didn't rehearse. I sat down, stared into the lens, and told the truth. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just plainly. I talked about how we met. I talked about our wedding, how Naomi looked right at me and said she'd never betray my trust, that I was her home. I talked about the nights she told me she was working late and I waited up with dinner. I talked about the first time I realized she had memorized someone else's body instead of mine. And then I pulled out the photos. I showed the texts. I played one voicemail, the one where she called him baby and told him she wished I would just sign and go away. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I just looked into the camera and said she gave me divorce papers as a gift. I smiled because I had a better one. The last shot was a still image. Naomi's lover walking into a middle school auditorium with his wife and children. And the words on screen, he didn't know either. I uploaded the video privately. No names. No location tags. No faces exposed, just blurred enough to protect the innocent. It wasn't blackmail. It was clarity. A record. A line in the sand. Then I sent it to 2 people, Naomi's boss, the one who had invited us both to his lake house for 4th of July last year, and her lover's wife. And then I turned off my phone. I checked out of the lodge that same evening and drove to my cousin Elijah's place in Montana. Elijah's a carpenter. Doesn't own a TV. Doesn't care about social media. I told him I needed a few weeks of air and silence. He offered me his guest room and a set of tools. I started sanding down wood just to feel something real beneath my hands. For the first time in over a year, I slept through the night. 3 days later, Elijah came into the shed with a look on his face that told me something had broken through the quiet. "You're getting mail, man," he said. "And I don't mean letters. People are sending you support. Like actual letters. I checked your old email. One of them said your story got shared by a therapist online. It's blowing up." I didn't know what to do with that information. I never wanted to go viral. I didn't want sympathy or a following. But part of me, a small, buried part, felt seen. And then came the message I never expected. It was from Corinne. I watched it. I cried. "I'm sorry I left you alone in that marriage. I should have said something years ago. I'm with you now." I didn't know how to reply. What do you say to someone who finally saw what you've lived through in silence? I typed, deleted, retyped, and finally sent. "Thank you for seeing me." That night, Elijah and I drank whiskey by the fire and I told him the whole story. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like less of a man for having been betrayed. I felt clean. Like something had been cut from me that was never supposed to stay. But Naomi? She wasn't done. The next morning, Elijah handed me his phone. She called my landline 5 times, he said. Left a message. She sounds different. I played the voicemail. Her voice was hoarse. Panicked. Like the Naomi I'd known had been drowned out by someone completely unfamiliar. Grant, I know you're angry, but you have to stop. Please. I made mistakes. Big ones. But you're ruining lives. People are talking. His wife left. My job's on the line. I don't know what else you want. I paused the message. That was the thing. I didn't want anything anymore. But I knew she wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because the lie she lived in had collapsed. And she had nothing to stand on. And that wasn't my fault. Naomi's voice used to be her weapon. Calm, composed, impossible to argue with. She could make you feel like the irrational one while she dismantled your point of view with surgical precision. But the voice on that voicemail, it was breaking. Not trembling for sympathy, trembling from loss of control. And Naomi without control was like a ballerina without music. Still trying to perform, but everything out of rhythm. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. My silence was no longer a retreat. It was a wall, a boundary, and the louder she banged on it, the more obvious it became that her power only existed when I allowed her inside. But Naomi wasn't used to being ignored. That same afternoon, Corinne texted me a screenshot. It was a Facebook post from Naomi, carefully curated, emotionally manipulative, with just enough vagueness to draw sympathy from people who didn't know the truth. Sometimes, even when you give your best, people choose destruction. Please be kind. You never know what someone's going through. Over 100 likes. Dozens of supportive comments. People offering hugs, virtual prayers, invitations for wine nights. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. Naomi wasn't just trying to rewrite the story. She was trying to cast herself as the victim, the woman abandoned, betrayed, emotionally wounded by a cold, ungrateful man. The irony was unbearable. She was still performing, still pretending, but this time the mask wasn't sticking, because cracks were forming behind the scenes. That evening, Corinne called me. Her voice was tight with barely concealed fury. She showed up at Mom's house, sobbing like a teenager. I didn't even know she knew how to cry. Said you were trying to destroy her life. I told her to cut the theatrics. You didn't post anything. You didn't name her. You let her fall on her own. That's what scares her. You didn't fight back. I didn't reply at first. Then I said quietly, exactly. Silence. Then Corinne added, I've known she was like this since we were kids, but I didn't think she'd ever go this far. I let her words sink in. Even her own family had known. And yet I'd spent years trying to prove I was good enough for a woman who saw loyalty as a weakness and kindness as something to exploit. Naomi had a history of reinventing herself when cornered. I knew what came next, the pity campaign, the new narrative, the emotional bait. So I wasn't surprised when, 2 days later, I received a handwritten letter delivered by courier. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter in her handwriting. Grant, what we had mattered. You were a good man, maybe still are. I never stopped appreciating your patience, even when I acted like I didn't. I made mistakes, huge ones, but I want to believe that there's a piece of you that remembers how we started. Before the noise, before the silence. I'm asking you to meet me, one last time. No drama, no bitterness, just honesty. Naomi. I reread it twice. The last time Naomi wrote me anything by hand was in college. Back when she still doodled hearts in the margins and signed her name with a curl. Now the ink felt too neat, too controlled, too calculated. Still, part of me was curious. Not hopeful, not nostalgic. Just curious to see who she really was when the curtain had fallen. I met her at a quiet cafe by the river, a place we used to go to on Sunday mornings when life still felt unscripted. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like she'd stepped out of a catalog, as if image alone could erase the past. She wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. When she finally took them off, her eyes looked tired. Not sad, not sorry, just worn. She sat down without saying a word. I let the silence hang. Finally, she spoke. I didn't expect you to say yes. I didn't say yes, I replied. I said I'd listen. She nodded, took a slow breath. I lost everything. I tilted my head. Did you? She blinked. You don't believe me. I believe you lost your illusion of control. That's not the same thing. She looked down at her coffee. He left. His wife moved out. His boss found out. I've been told to take a leave of absence. I might lose my job. For a moment her voice cracked, but I said nothing. She stared at me, as if waiting for me to rush in with comfort, with rescue, but I didn't move, didn't flinch. I thought you'd try to ruin me, she said finally. I didn't, I replied. You did it yourself. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, maybe for the first time. You're not the same man, she whispered. No, I said, standing slowly. I'm not. And then I said the words I'd been holding since the day she handed me that envelope. You gave me divorce papers as a gift. I smiled because I had one of my own. Freedom. Then I walked away. And this time I didn't look back. But Naomi, she sat there. Alone. And for once, no one was watching. I didn't feel victorious as I walked away from that cafe. There was no sense of conquest, no movie-ending swell of music. Just the cool air hitting my face and the low hum of life continuing without us. Naomi stayed seated behind me. I never once turned around. I didn't need to. That chapter had ended, and not with a bang, but with a quiet truth neither of us could escape. You hear people talk about freedom like it's a doorway you walk through once and everything's brighter on the other side. But it's not. At first, it's hollow. It's waking up without her alarm going off next to you. It's drinking your coffee in silence without her voice filling the kitchen, even if it was just background noise. It's walking past mirrors and not recognizing your own reflection because for years you measured your worth by the way she looked at you or didn't. Freedom for me came slowly. It didn't look like some grand reinvention. It looked like folding laundry without resentment. It looked like deleting photos from my phone without shaking hands. It looked like realizing that I could walk into a grocery store without texting someone to ask what brand of milk she wanted. It was small, ordinary, but powerful. And yet, no matter how far I moved past it, echoes of Naomi's world tried to follow me. A week after our meeting, I received an email from her attorney. Simple, direct, and unmistakably desperate. Naomi wanted to reconsider the terms. She claimed she'd signed the divorce papers too hastily and asked if I'd be open to a revision. There was no mention of love. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a legal appeal to my reason, or rather, my silence. I didn't even reply. I forwarded it to my own lawyer with one line, no response necessary. Proceed as planned. What Naomi didn't understand, maybe never would, was that it wasn't about money or property or revenge. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted peace. And peace isn't something you negotiate with someone who only sees relationships as transactions. While she tried to pull legal strings, the world around her kept unraveling. My cousin Elijah texted me one morning with a screenshot from his friend in the city, a mutual acquaintance who worked in PR. Apparently, Naomi's affair had quietly made its way through some private corporate channels. Nothing public, but enough that rumors began to spread. Her leave of absence became permanent. Her name was quietly removed from committee rosters. Her invitations to charity events went unanswered. She didn't just lose me. She lost the image of herself she had spent years curating. And me? I started building something else. I moved out of state. Small town. Quiet place. I got a job consulting for a construction firm that didn't care about resumes or backstories. Just results. I worked with my hands more. Ate alone without feeling lonely. And eventually, I began talking to people again, not out of obligation, but curiosity. The kind of small conversations that don't mean much in the moment but build something real over time. There was a woman named Harper who ran the bookstore across from my new place. Smart, sarcastic, unapologetically herself. She once handed me a copy of The Art of Letting Go without asking what I was going through. She just said, "You look like someone who needs less noise in his head." I laughed harder than I had in years. We didn't start anything. Not then. I wasn't ready. But the way she looked at me, it was different. It wasn't needy. It wasn't calculating. It wasn't based on who I used to be. It was just human. Uncomplicated. Honest. And that's when I realized Naomi had never really destroyed me. She just revealed me, stripped everything away until I was finally able to see myself clearly. Not as a victim. Not as a man scorned. But as someone who had allowed himself to settle for emotional scraps thinking that was normal, it wasn't. And if there's one thing I took from all of it, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the lies, it's this. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes silence is the sound of a man rebuilding himself, brick by steady brick, without anyone watching. Because real peace doesn't come when the storm ends. It comes when you stop letting other people bring the rain. It had been nearly 5 months since I last saw Naomi. Since that day in the cafe, she'd vanished from my reality like smoke leaving a burned-out room. No more letters, no more voicemails, no more legal maneuvering. It was as if she'd finally realized there was nothing left to salvage. I'd moved on, maybe not into another relationship, but into a version of life where I didn't flinch when I heard her name. And for a while, I thought that was the end of it. Then I got a message from a blocked number. Not a text. A video. I hesitated before playing it. My instinct said it was bait, that she was trying to stir something again, dig her claws into whatever version of myself she hadn't completely uprooted. But curiosity is a strange thing. Even when you know better, you press play. She was sitting in what looked like a hotel room. The lighting was dim, makeup smeared slightly under her eyes, not in an I've been crying way, but in a I'm pretending I have kind of way. She looked at the camera like someone preparing for a performance, one she hoped would finally land. Grant, she began, her voice low, almost shaking. You're probably not going to watch this all the way through. But I need to say something, and I need it recorded. I paused it right there. Something about the phrase, I need it recorded, twisted in my gut. This wasn't for me. This was for someone else. Documentation. A final chess move. I let it play. She rambled for a while, about our past, about how she had been confused, how she never meant to hurt me, how things spiraled and mistakes compounded. Then she shifted. I saw it happen in real time. Her shoulders straightened. Her tone cooled. And she delivered the real reason for the message. I need you to confirm that I never coerced you, she said. That everything between us, our marriage, our separation, was consensual. That I never manipulated you. That I never emotionally abused you. You've made people think I'm someone I'm not, and it's affecting my ability to move forward with my life and career. There it was. The final card. Naomi wasn't trying to apologize. She wasn't trying to reconnect. She was trying to erase. To rewrite. To legally shield herself from consequences she created. She had spent our entire marriage bending reality, and now that reality was folding in on her, she was panicking. Trying to turn me into the aggressor. Trying to control the narrative one last time. I didn't reply. I didn't threaten. But I documented everything. I sent the video to my attorney with a timestamped summary of every moment she described and the written receipts that contradicted every claim. Photos. Emails. Her own texts. My lawyer didn't even flinch. She's testing the water, he said. Trying to see if you'll blink. You didn't then. Don't now. He was right. I wasn't afraid of Naomi anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was detached. Like watching someone walk into a storm they created and blaming the sky for the thunder. But the video wasn't the end. A few days later, Harper, the woman from the bookstore, walked into the cafe across from my new place, holding her phone awkwardly. Grant, she said carefully, someone sent me something about you. I think you should see it. I took her phone. It was a private message. From a fake account. A long message filled with vague accusations suggesting I had been emotionally unstable, possibly controlling, and that people should know the truth before trusting him. There was no name signed, but the style, the rhythm, the language, it was Naomi. She hadn't just tried to rewrite the story for herself. She was trying to poison the soil where I'd begun to plant something new. I closed the message and gave Harper her phone back. She used to be my wife, I said quietly. And I think she still hates that she can't narrate my life anymore. Harper didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, then maybe it's time you wrote your own ending. That sentence stuck with me for days. I'd spent so long cleaning up her messes in my mind, my memory, my reputation, that I hadn't realized I was still playing defense. Still waiting for her to pull something else. But Harper was right. It was time I stopped reacting. It was time I built something she couldn't touch. Not a rebuttal. Not a counterattack. A life. Unapologetic. Quiet. Real. And if Naomi still needed an audience for her performance, let her play to empty seats. 6 months passed. Naomi didn't send another message. The fake accounts went silent. No more video threats, no letters, no sudden attempts to explain. The windstorm she had kicked up finally lost its strength. People say that if you leave a fire without oxygen, it dies on its own. She did just that, burned out in the vacuum of her own noise, with no one left willing to fan the flames. And I didn't just move on. I rebuilt. Not all at once. Healing never works like that. It's not a switch you flip, it's a slow climb, one quiet decision at a time. I started small. I repainted the kitchen in my new place. I got back into trail hiking. I began journaling again, not to process pain but to document peace. I even adopted an old mutt from the local shelter, a droopy-faced thing named Max who snored louder than a chainsaw but followed me everywhere like we'd always known each other. And Harper, she became more than just a friend behind a bookstore counter. It happened gradually. She never pushed, never tried to fix me. She just listened, shared space, laughed without performance. She saw the man I was without needing to reshape him into something shinier. One evening, she brought over dinner and stayed late, helping me alphabetize my growing stack of books, her feet tucked under her on the couch like she belonged there. I don't need promises, she said quietly, just honesty. And for the first time in years, I realized I could give that. Freely. Without fear. Because when you've survived someone who twists reality, finding someone who simply tells the truth feels like standing in sunlight after a long winter. But the real turning point came one Sunday morning when I drove out to a quiet stretch of road near the lake. It was the same place Naomi and I had visited years ago, back when we still thought love meant clinging, not growing. I stood at the edge of the water, pulled a worn envelope from my coat, the original divorce papers she had handed me like a gift, wrapped in false elegance, and I let the wind take it. It lifted from my fingers, caught the morning light, and floated like a leaf before landing in the shallows. I didn't watch it sink. I turned around. And I walked back towards something better, not someone better, but something. A life built not out of what I'd lost, but out of what I'd chosen to become. I was no longer the man she betrayed. I was the man who survived it. And there is nothing more powerful, more final, and more liberating than learning that closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from waking up, looking in the mirror, and knowing. She no longer has a single piece of me. And I'm finally whole again.